50 miles east of Portland, Oregon, a mountain is quietly preparing to cut the water supply for 1 million people. Not with a lava flow, not with an earthquake, but with a torrent of liquid concrete moving at highway speed down a river valley. As of this week, Mount Hood is seismically quiet. Its 11,249-foot summit is covered in glaciers, attracting climbers and tourists. The U.S. Geological Survey reports its status is normal. Green, safe, but this is the detail that changes the entire story. The threat from Mount Hood isn't a surprise explosion. It is a calculated, well-understood, and historically repeated process of collapse. And the infrastructure that an entire American city depends on for survival lies directly in its path. To understand what is happening, you must first understand the way this specific volcano works. Mount Hood is not Mount St. Helens. The magma that feeds it is different, thicker, stickier, less charged with gas. It doesn't produce the cataclysmic Plinian eruption that blows the top off a mountain and darkens the sky for 3 states. Instead, Mount Hood erupts like toothpaste. The viscous magma pushes upward, extruding out of a vent and building a steep, unstable tower of lava and hot rock. This is a lava dome. On Mount Hood, the most recent one is a 550-foot high feature you can see today. It's called crater rock. Eventually, that dome, pushed from within and pulled by gravity, will fail. It will shatter. When it does, it releases a pyroclastic flow, a superheated avalanche of gas and pulverized rock, thousands of degrees hot, racing down the mountain's flanks. That flow is not the primary weapon. It is the trigger. Mount Hood holds 11 active glaciers. When that pyroclastic flow hits the ice, the energy transfer is instantaneous and terrifying. The glaciers flash into meltwater. Billions of gallons of water mix with the collapsing rock, with volcanic ash, with soil, with entire forests. This creates a lahar, a volcanic mudflow. It has the consistency of wet concrete, dense enough to carry house-sized boulders, and it moves with the speed of a car on a freeway, up to 50 miles per hour. These lahars do not stop. They follow the path of least resistance. The river valleys. And they will scour those valleys clean, burying everything for dozens of miles downstream. That is the real threat of Mount Hood. It's not a volcano that explodes. It's a volcano that melts and flows. This is the part the scenic photographs do not capture. In November of 1805, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark were on the final leg of their journey to the Pacific. As they reached the mouth of a significant tributary flowing into the Columbia River, they found something that defied their expectations. The river was choked. Not with logs, not with rocks, but with an immense volume of gray, gritty sediment. So much so that they couldn't navigate it. They named it the Quicksand River. Today, we call it the Sandy River. What Lewis and Clark were documenting, without realizing it, was the direct aftermath of Mount Hood's last major eruption. Just 24 years earlier, in 1781, Mount Hood had awakened. The Old Maid eruptive period began, building the crater rock dome and sending a series of massive lahars down the Sandy and White River valleys. The evidence that choked the river for Lewis and Clark in 1805 demonstrates how long-lasting the consequences are. The eruption was over, but the landscape was still fundamentally altered decades later. It was a warning written in silt, and that warning is still visible today, if you know where to look. Hike into the canyons of the White River, or the Sandy River. Deep within the Mount Hood National Forest, what you might find are ghosts, the buried forests. These are the preserved trunks of ancient Douglas fir and cedar trees, some hundreds of years old when they died. They were entombed instantly by the lahars of the past, not burned, but mummified, standing vertically in a matrix of hardened mud. For centuries, they were hidden. Now, erosion is re-exposing them, their pale, stripped trunks emerging from the riverbanks. They are a physical monument to the speed and power of these flows. One moment, a living forest. The next, a buried graveyard. The trees of the Timberline eruptive period, 1,500 years ago, were part of a lahar so massive it traveled over 50 miles and physically diverted the course of the Columbia River. These are not small events. They are landscape-altering forces. Now, here is the part nobody living in the Portland metro area can afford to ignore. The city itself, the downtown core, is largely safe from a direct hit by a lahar. The flows would dissipate or be redirected before traveling the full 50 miles into dense urban zones. The danger to Portland is more subtle and far more severe. 26 miles east of the city, nestled in the folds of the Mount Hood National Forest, is a 102 square mile sanctuary, the Bull Run Watershed. This is a protected, off-limits area containing 2 reservoirs that hold nearly 10 billion gallons of some of the purest untreated water in the United States. It gets an average of 135 inches of rain a year, and it provides the primary source of drinking water for 1 million people in the Portland region. That watershed lies directly in the path of airborne ash from a Mount Hood eruption. Its reservoirs are fed by rivers that would be immediately contaminated by sediment and debris. An eruption doesn't need to send a lahar into downtown Portland to cripple the city. It only needs to poison the water. This is Portland's Achilles heel. A major eruption could blanket the entire watershed in a thick layer of fine, glassy, abrasive ash. This ash would clog intake valves, damage pumping equipment, and render the water undrinkable without massive filtration. Even a small eruption, or a large eruption triggered wildfire on the mountain slopes, could wash tons of sediment and debris into the Bull Run reservoirs, creating a turbidity crisis that could last for months or years. The Portland Water Bureau knows this. The city's entire water security is balanced against the geologic stability of a volcano the USGS has officially designated as a very high threat. This isn't a theoretical problem. This is a multi-billion-dollar engineering race against a geologic clock. As of February of this year, the Portland Water Bureau's project to construct a new water filtration facility for the Bull Run supply has seen its estimated cost balloon to $2.6 billion. The primary driver for the plant was a federal mandate to treat for a specific parasite and the rising threat of wildfires. But its most critical function in the coming decades may be as a defense against the volcano. A filtration plant is the only thing that could potentially scrub volcanic ash from the city's water supply on a massive scale. Without it, an eruption, similar to the Old Maid event of 1781, could trigger a public health and logistics crisis on a scale the region has never seen. 1 million people, suddenly without clean tap water, for an indefinite period of time. So, the city is spending billions to defend its water. But the danger isn't just in the future. The mountain is alive right now. Mount Hood is the most seismically active volcano in Oregon. Every single month, on average, 1 to 2 small earthquakes occur within 3 miles of its summit. These are background tremors, the mountain stretching and shifting. But sometimes, they come in swarms. In July 1980, just 2 months after Mount St. Helens erupted, a 5-day swarm of nearly 60 earthquakes rattled Mount Hood, prompting local authorities to draft their first modern emergency response plan. More recently, from December 8th to 13th, 2023, another notable swarm occurred. Dozens of small quakes. The USGS, under the watch of Dr. Seth Moran at the Cascades Volcano Observatory, quickly determined it was related to regional faults, not rising magma. But here's the detail that provides both comfort and a deep sense of unease. According to the USGS, a major eruption at Mount Hood is almost impossible without warning. Because the volcano has been dormant for so long, the internal plumbing, the conduits that magma uses to reach the surface, has solidified into hard rock. For an eruption to happen, fresh magma has to rise from deep within the earth and fracture its way up. That process would create weeks, if not months, of intense escalating earthquake swarms and gas emissions. Scientists would see it coming. They have a network of seismic stations and GPS monitors, significantly upgraded between 2019 and 2021, precisely for this purpose. The mountain is being watched. Constantly, the warning will almost certainly come. But this is the part the emergency plans don't fully prepare you for. What happens on the day the USGs changes Mount Hood's status from green to yellow, or from yellow to orange? The roads leading away from the threatened valleys, the Sandy and White River corridors, are few. They would be jammed instantly. A warning of weeks does not guarantee a safe evacuation in the final hours. The psychological impact on a region that sees the mountain as a benign, beautiful backdrop would be immense. The economic disruption would begin the moment the alert level changes, long before any ash falls, and there is an even more pressing statistical reality. For all the talk of the big one, the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake that seismologists predict for the Pacific Northwest, the volcano presents a more immediate, localized threat. The USGS estimates the probability of a lahar impacting the Sandy and White River valleys. The very same valleys scarred by past flows is between 1 in 15 and 1 in 30 during any given 30-year window. Those are not deep geologic odds. That is a credible risk within the time frame of a home mortgage. For the communities nestled in those valleys, the beautiful view comes with a statistically significant threat of annihilation. It was a British Royal Navy officer, William Robert Broughton, who first documented the mountain for the Europeans on October 29, 1792. He was part of Captain George Vancouver's expedition. He named it in honor of Samuel Hood, a famous British admiral who fought in the American Revolutionary War, an admiral who would never see the mountain that bears his name. The native Multnomah people, who had lived in its shadow for millennia, already had a name for it: Wy'east. The name itself is tied to legends of creation, gods, and immense power. They understood what the mountain was. They saw it not as a static landmark, but as a living entity, one capable of profound creation and destruction. Their stories were their own form of a hazard assessment report, passed down through generations. The science and the stories now tell the same tale. We have the tree ring data that pinpoints the start of the Old Maid eruptive period to 1781. We have the eyewitness accounts of settlers who reported minor steam and ash venting as late as January 1866. We have the GPS data showing the slow, subtle inflation of the ground surface as magma pressure shifts miles below. We have the geological record of past eruptive phases, the zigzag period around 1400 C, and the much larger Timberland period around 500 C. Each event left its mark. Each event followed the same pattern of dome growth, collapse, and lahars. The volcano is predictable in its unpredictability. It follows a script, and the next act is overdue. The current system of monitoring is a marvel of modern science. Dr. Seth Moran and his team at the Cascades Volcano Observatory in Vancouver, Washington, are the sentinels. They watch the tilt of the Earth, measured in millimeters. They listen for the specific frequency of earthquakes that signal magma breaking rock. They analyze gases escaping from fumaroles near crater rock. They are looking for the telltale signs that the system is awakening from its slumber. The 2018 update to the National Volcanic Threat Assessment, which redesignated Mount Hood as very high, was a direct result of this enhanced understanding. It's not that the volcano suddenly became more dangerous. It's that our understanding of its potential impact on the rapidly growing population around it became clearer. The risk isn't just geological, it's demographic. More people, more infrastructure, more to lose. And the loss could be calculated not just in property, but in the very identity of the region. Mount Hood is more than a geologic feature. It is a recreational paradise. It is the backdrop for a million photographs. Its slopes host ski resorts, hiking trails, and the historic Timberline Lodge. It is deeply woven into the cultural fabric of Oregon. This creates a dangerous paradox. The very beauty and accessibility of the mountain make it difficult for many to perceive it as an active, imminent threat. It is a postcard, not a powder keg. But the geology doesn't care about perception. The pressure builds regardless of how many lift tickets are sold. Think about the physics for a moment. The elevation, 11,249 feet, is not the most important number. The key number is the volume of ice and snow it holds perpetually on its upper flanks. This is the ammunition. The heat from a pyroclastic flow is the trigger. A lahar is the bullet. The river valleys are the gun barrel, aimed directly at the lowlands. The communities of Government Camp, Rhododendron, Zigzag, and Sandy are built on, or immediately adjacent to, the deposits of past lahars. They exist in the very places that history, written in layers of mud and rock, tells us are the most dangerous. The defense systems are almost entirely passive. Warning sirens have been installed in some of these communities. There are established evacuation routes. But these measures are designed to save lives, not property. Nothing can stop a lahar. You cannot build a wall high enough or strong enough to hold back a 30-foot high wave of what is essentially liquid rock, moving at 50 miles per hour. The only defense is to not be there when it arrives. This is the stark reality that residents and emergency planners live with. The warning will be the only shield they have. So, while the headlines in Portland focus on earthquakes and urban policy, the mountain waits. Its last recorded activity, those minor steam bursts in 1866, is now more than a century and a half in the past. Each passing year extends the dormant period, and in volcanic terms, the longer the period of quiet, the more pressure can build within the magma chamber. The solid rock plug in the conduit gets thicker, stronger. It requires more force to break. The scientists at the USGs have said it should take weeks or months of fracturing for magma to reach the surface, which is reassuring. But that reassurance only covers the timing, not the outcome. The event is still coming. It is a silent, systemic risk, the kind that gets overshadowed by more immediate crises. The December 2023 earthquake swarm was a brief headline, a momentary spike in public awareness. Then it faded. The mountain returned to its role as a beautiful backdrop. But for the geologists, the swarm was another data point in a very long story. It was a reminder that the tectonic plates continue to grind. The deep heat source continues to cook, and the system remains active. It was not the precursor to an eruption, but it was a product of the exact same forces that will, one day, produce one. 3 questions now hang over the Cascade Range. When the official warning is issued and the alert level changes, will the evacuation plans work on the clogged, narrow highways leading away from the mountain? Is a $2.6 billion filtration plant, a project born of regulatory compliance and wildfire fears, truly enough to safeguard the water supply of a major American city from a geologic event centuries in the making? And what does the quiet of the mountain truly mean? Is it the peace of a deep slumber, or the silence of a pressure vessel reaching its limit? The sunlight hitting the Palmer Glacier on the south face of Mount Hood is melting snow right now. That water is trickling down, feeding the headwaters of the Sandy and the White and the Zigzag rivers. Deep below, miles beneath the surface, a chamber of magma sits, subject to immense pressures and temperatures. The rock between that chamber and the surface is strained, crisscrossed with faults. The quiet is not emptiness. It is a state of equilibrium. And every piece of data we have, from the mummified forests in its canyons to the choked river discovered by Lewis and Clark, tells us that this equilibrium is temporary. The warning signs are not just in the seismic sensors. They are written across the land itself.